Hello and welcome to another edition of the Door 14 Hockey Podcast. I'm your host Marty alongside John.
Hey.
Just us again. Yeah.
Well, it's not just us. Hello YouTube and hello Twitter.
Yes, and the three people who are probably watching us on YouTube or Twitter.
I'm one of them.
You're you're one of them. So at least we have some. Well, at least we'll have one watcher, which is great. Yes, we are. I think in a way to make John even lazier, so it gives him an even easier job. We decided to go live with the podcast this year, just so that we don't have to do the editing part of the video to throw it up onto YouTube. I'm guessing that's the reason why, John, is it?
I'll defer to Dave on that, considering the video podcast originally was his idea, and so was the YouTube live. It's just taken us, I'm going to say 3 years to finally get round to it. And he's not even here for it. But he's got a good reason, let's be fair.
Yeah, no, both Aaron and Dave are on family duties tonight. I think Aaron's just back from that there London, and I think has a case of chicken pox in the house with his child. So that's fun times dealing with that. John, did you see my nice new background that I
did. It's lovely. I'm liking the LEDs. I'm also liking the McLaren hanging there.
Just here on this side. I kind of forget that it's mirrored. So yeah, this side. Yeah, I kind of last year, towards the end of last year, I was kind of, when we were doing more of the video stuff, I was kind of getting a bit more jealous each week as I seen both your background kind of morphing into what it became, and also Aaron's background. And I thought, I need to step up my game. So this is the start of it. And I'm going to add some more stuff to this part of the wall here. So
very nice. I think the only addition I have is my lovely new hat display wall. Yep. Everyone who knows me knows that I love a hat, so I now have a lovely display wall for them.
Nice. And you have to add more to that this year then, whenever it comes to the new merchandise this year. We are going to have just a quick catch up for this episode, mostly just to kind of have a quick rundown of really what it is. I suppose just a kind of catch up of the off season so far. The last time we got together, John, was June time, and we had a bit of a breakdown of how things were standing at that point. A number of different changes in relation to, we had coaches in and out, we had players starting to leave. But now, sitting here at the start, just at the tail end of July, start of August, we're starting to get a bit more of a clear picture and a clear understanding of where teams are starting to move to, when in relation to kind of like how rosters are starting to kind of become full, and we're heading towards the tail end of August, where we're going to see the first parts of, I suppose, the warm up games, the preseason games will start with I think the Belfast Giants and Cardiff, I think, are the first ones at the tail end of August. But before we get to that, we do have some news, obviously, to talk about, and we're going to catch up with some of that. But we wanted to talk about two main ones to start off with. Obviously, over the last number of weeks, last week particularly, we got the sad news coming through of the untimely death of Mike Hammond. Mike Hammond was previously of the Nottingham Panthers, has just left the team there this past year. He was a Great Britain international player as well, iced for Manchester and Glasgow in the Elite League, and unfortunately passed away in North America just over a week ago. Obviously, the Elite League was shocked and just completely silenced by his death, just sudden passing, obviously through, I think it was a car crash, unfortunately. And all of our thoughts and stuff to the family and friends of Mike, and it's a tough one. I know I was reading, John, that he had signed, I think Glasgow had mentioned that he had signed for them this year, potentially moving forward. He was signed as a contract for them in the 2023-2024 season. I mean, it's just a great Brit player who we've lost, unfortunately.
Yeah, really, really sad. Mike was an EIHL stalwart at his time before the EIHL as well, and a GB stalwart as well, playing in this year's World Championships as well. So really, really sad guy, taken long before his time, and what would have been a great career cut short, unfortunately. So like you say, our thoughts go to his friends, his family, and to his teammates, past and what would have been present this year as well.
Yeah, I did see that Nottingham put out a tribute to him for this coming season, where they have his name and number and what's the word I'm looking for? A banner outside the arena, which I believe will be there throughout the season, as a nice kind of gesture towards his memory for this coming season. As John said, we put out our biggest our thoughts and prayers to them and his family at this time. I also wanted to mention, John, as well, before we move on to the next part, is we also have another young player who unfortunately passed away at the tail end of June. The Elite League was saddened to learn of the passing of Alex Graham as well. He was a 20-year-old young player who had just signed his first contract, his first professional contract, as you say, with Sheffield Steelers. He had appeared for them in his debut in 2019, but he's signed his first full-time contract. Again, another young player, another young Brit player who unfortunately has passed away, unfortunately. And again, our thoughts and prayers to that family as well. I believe his funeral was this week. And again, just another young player that was just left too soon.
It's a tough. We know that people have tough times, and we know that every year we have the Bell Let's Talk campaign. So it's not just one day a year. Let's keep the conversation going, everyone. Everyone has bad days. Find someone to chat to. Our DMs are always open, either through the podcast or personally. You can see Marty and my handles down below our names there. So yeah, there's always someone to talk to, you guys.
Yeah, no, that's well said, John. We just wanted to, obviously, we wouldn't be remiss if we didn't mention that. Obviously, at the start of our podcast, we felt that was important to mention. Obviously, and pay our condolences and give our shout outs as well and our thoughts and prayers at this time for all of that. But we will move on to our next part of our podcast, obviously, and kind of get a catch up, I suppose, John, of how we're kind of sitting at the end of July, as I mentioned before, coming into the tail end, the last part of this off season. Most teams are put together, or a lot of teams are starting to kind of put together and form. Still a few names probably, and still a few signings still to be announced for a few teams. But let's start off with the first announcement, which isn't actually a player, but after our last podcast, we had a bit of a chat around the changes that were happening up north, there in Scotland, close to home to you, John, in Fife there. Fife Flyers have announced the appointment of a new head coach in the form of and Tom Goin for the 2023-2024 season. This obviously came off the back of the announcement of people stepping down there. Long-time head coach Todd Dudiam and assistant coach Jeff Hutchins. John, first off, we've been talking about this for a long time. Obviously, we look at the credentials that this new coach has. Colin coming in for the Fife. We talked about how Fife have almost became stagnant over the last number of years, shall we say, sticking to the same format, sticking to the same routine, not seeming to pull any triggers in relation to the fact that they've addressed any issues in relation to the fact that they have came last each year or towards the bottom anyway. Grasping onto that, obviously set that final this year. But I mean, about time. What's your thoughts there?
Oh, it's long before time. Ever since I think day one on this podcast, when we started, I have been part of the voice ringing for change in Fife. This appointment and the signings that have followed have been stellar for Fife. A new start, as you say, it's definitely something that's needed. And his connections seem to be far-reaching, and I'm very, very interested to see what the Fife Flyers are going to do this season.
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky enough that, John, you got a chance to catch up there in person. You were in Belfast last week, so we got caught up for coffee on one day and a beer on the other, and we got a good chance to chat about some of the the comings and goings and some of the changes that are happening in the league this so far this summer. And we did talk about Fife, and obviously the signings so far. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 new players to that team, 11 new faces already in Fife. I mean, it's good showing. And we've said it before, and I know sometimes we kind of get ourselves a bit excited about things quite quickly, and we kind of have to wait to see what happens when it comes to the season. But I mean, I think we both were quite like, they look like good on paper. They're really starting to put together a good looking, strong team. How they do not on the budget they have, but it's looking interesting.
I'll be interested. Like I say, I'll be really, really interested. It was worrying up until this week when there were no homegrown players signed for Fife. That was the big worry to start with. Now, just I think either today or yesterday, they finally signed a homegrown player, which is great to see. It's a young local lad, getting or a returning local lad, I should say, for Fife. And that's fantastic to see that Tom Coolan has taken on board messaging, probably from some backroom staff or probably from chatting to Doots, who I know won't have just closed the door behind him on a career in Fife. He will have spoken to Tom on his appointment. So hopefully some of that will filter down through. Now, yes, we know that Fife had a bit of an exodus of homegrown talent. Solway Sharks being the absolute machine that they have been in this off-season, and the seeming incredible work of Craig Peacock as their GM has pulled a lot of incredible talent across into that team. And Fife seemed to be the elite league team suffering the most from that. But Shane Owen is still in nets there. You've got a new North American coach with bench experience with teams like the Buffalo Sabres. I think I put a tweet out on his appointment. It must be really interesting to have worked in the home of the Buffalo Sabres and then find yourself in that car park in Kirkcaldy. But yeah, like good netminding and a solid, what seems to be a solid team. I'm saying it now. They could challenge for silverware. I think I say it every season. They could challenge for silverware. I think that's just the Fifer in me coming out. But here's hoping it's actually real this time. Here's hoping that Fife can actually do something for once.
When you're talking about silverware, are you talking about getting through to the Challenge Cup final again and then getting put out? Or sorry, that's mean. I mean, that's as you mentioned, the great caliber of. Oh, did we lose John? Technical difficulties. Did we lose you there for a minute, John?
Sorry, I had an absolute mare there and my laptop turned off for just a moment.
Oh dear. That's what happens when you go live.
At least I finished my sentence.
I was going to ask. You were obviously talking about the caliber of teams that he came from, Coolan has come from. One of the things to note, he did obviously he's no stranger to the Elite League. Like, he knows the Elite League, having played against the Belfast Giants in the 2019 WHF Continental Cup final. In which he was coaching. He was the coach of Katowice at that time in Poland. Although the one thing, correct me if I'm wrong, John, when he was with Katowice, is that the team where he was
he likes to throw his wardrobe. He likes to throw his wardrobe. So there was a call that he didn't agree with, and he decided to, I believe, throw his jacket on the ice, his suit jacket. So yeah, we look forward to getting under Tom Coolan's skin once again.
That will be an interesting thing to see. John, let's stick with Scotland, since we were talking about Fife, and let's have a wee look further up north. At least I think it's further up north. Don't know my geography that well. And look at the Dundee Stars. Just quickly before we turn our attention to Glasgow, who's obviously going through a lot of changes down there too. Dundee seem to also be kind of similar to Fife, and I suppose Glasgow in some ways, in that they're another team that seem to be big on change this year, having signed 10 new players to the team. So again, 10 new faces, one or two familiar faces coming back. one particular player, which I just love, which I just don't think Dundee really took advantage of when it first happened, was Johnny Walker, which I just think is an ideal name for someone who's coming to play in Scotland. Similar again, obviously we usually see the likes of Dundee, Fife, and Glasgow, obviously competing for that biggest team in Scotland kind of trope. Do you think with the team that Dundee have put together so far, do you think it's something that they're going to be able to do this year? Are they going to be able to do something more this year compared to previous year? And we all know, obviously, that the Dundee Stars parted ways after one season. Obviously with their coach, and they went for another new coach as well this season. I mean,
well, not a new coach,
Well, returning coach. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's part. I think this is part of why Dundee might be one to watch again. We know from a Belfast perspective, we feel like we never stop playing Dundee, especially with the Challenge Cup and what seems to be an endless run of games, both home and away to them. Mark Lefebvre, having been away, spent his time in North America. I think he went back to Europe as well after his time in North America. He is in that same vein for me as Tom Coolan. He will have a lot more experience. He will have a lot more contacts. And again, this is where we're seeing the changes being rung in. I feel really bad, but this is exactly what I would have expected had Jeff Mason stayed for another season. I've rung on about this ever since the announcement was made that Jeff was leaving Dundee, is that he was not coaching his team. He was making the best of a team which was, for the most part, signed before he was even signed. Now, will Mark Lefebvre be given one season with a team that he has signed? I find it unlikely, especially given the strength and depth of feeling for Mark Lefebvre in Dundee. I think that's what the ownership there wanted with Jeff Mason. They wanted the Scot done good, won championships, comes back to Scotland and is successful. And it didn't happen, but that was through no fault of Jeff's, I feel. For Dundee now, big changes in netminding is always interesting to keep an eye on. Lucas Bryan coming in there between the pipes, that will be interesting. They have kept hold of Dryden Dow, who massively impressed me last season, actually, on the D line for them. He was really, really good. They have kept a core couple in the forwards as well. Garrigan. Every time I see it, I always think of the Soviet astronaut for some reason. It's just something in my head. Garrigan, he was fantastic. He's really speedy on the change up. He's absolutely fantastic. So I'll leave it out there. I think Fife are the more interesting as far as changes are concerned, but Dundee, don't count them out. Look, we haven't played a game yet. Let's not count anyone out at this point.
No,
there's 10 teams
exactly.
who can win the league at this point.
I mean, it's all unknown, as you say. Like, we don't know how things are going to pan out. But what we are clearly seeing, especially here in the Scottish region, what we're clearly seeing is complete new. I want to say, not the kind of phrase that's used over too much in hockey, but a full just rebrand, shall we say, just starting fresh with pretty much all three teams. I mean, we look at Glasgow as well. Glasgow this season are also changed coach, changed ownership, have signed Aaron Murphy as something to do with the team. I don't really know what that signing was.
Media manager, I think.
I mean, fair play.
Well, look, with Viaplay leaving, the man needed a job.
Well, that's true. Oh, sad times. But also there in Glasgow as well. I mean, we talked about, obviously Fife and Dundee and 11 and 10 new players. I mean, it's the same in Glasgow. Glasgow have complete new names in terms of goaltenders. They've got start to put together their forwards, rather than they still have to focus on their defense lines. But their forwards, I mean, there are a lot of new names there. Sniped in into a few from other teams around the league, but some good names coming through for them too.
That's the interesting point that you make there, is the number of snipes on the forward lines. So the new coach looks to have done his homework, and there looks to have been some groundwork done very early in the off season to get the likes of Rob Lakovitz, for example, Bryce Reddick, Philip Sanche, to get them across there. Glasgow, for as much as the other Scottish teams have been desperate for success for a number of years. Glasgow are a team who have been on the precipice of success for multiple seasons. They're now at the point where they really need something, and after last season, they need to come top half of the table, I feel. They need to be challenging for some sort of silverware because that fan base deserves something. Now, is the new ownership and is the big signings, is this brand, or they've taken on this thing of the massive, they're massive, Glasgow clan, massive. Is that enough? Is buying into your own hype, is that enough? No, because halfway through the season, if you're sitting in 8th, 9th, or 10th place, your fans are going to turn on you again. So, new owner, they know the direction that they want to go in. They need to do something to get themselves at least in that top half of the table this season.
Correct. I would agree. We're talking about that bottom half, of last year, the kind of those bottom three team, the Scottish teams unfortunately did finish the league run last year, right at the bottom. Unfortunately, just not being able to put it together wins enough to kind of pull them up further up. I think we talked about Glasgow last year, obviously starting off on a I suppose on a poor foot. They started off quite badly in terms of just the late start to the season, in terms of having to put together a lot of games together at a short piece of time to try and fit them in, because obviously as we know, ice was an issue last season at the start, and therefore they didn't start their season officially at home until I think it was maybe like October, November time, nearly close to that. So this year, hopefully Glasgow probably are trying to put things to right from day one, and trying to get up there as quickly as possible, start to kind of get the ball rolling. But if we're looking at towards those middle pack team from last season, John, so if we look at the middle pack of where the teams ended last year, so we're talking about the likes of your Manchester Storms, your Nottingham Panthers, and your Coventry Blaze, and we'll throw the Sheffield Steelers in there too. We'll look at those middle teams, particularly at the moment. And I suppose what I'm asking is, what I'm kind of getting from you. I want to kind of get your opinions on, I suppose, in relation to those teams. We had the Nottingham Panthers, who historically have always tried to be one of the big three or four. Historically tried. Over the last number of years, they have just unfortunately not been successful in kind of I suppose getting back to that level of competitive hockey that they've been used to in that part of the woods. Unfortunately, they, even through changes of coaching and stuff halfway through the season last year with the Nottingham Panthers, it didn't really pull the way they needed it to in terms of trying to get them up and running and back kind of in contention. I mean, the Nottingham Panthers, out of all of those teams that ended in the mid place, we say this probably every season, but definitely, after several attempts, I mean, you would imagine they have something this year that they kind of want to make sure that they're showing in terms of trying to kind of pull together and starting to kind of show that they're progressing and not just kind of getting stuck. Moved. Sorry, go ahead.
For the English teams, like we talked about the Scottish teams and where the desperation comes from because they've been starved of success. As far as the English teams that are in the league are concerned, the Nottingham Panthers are the Glasgow Clan, the Dundee Stars of England at this point in the Elite League. They have been thereabouts. They've had mild success. I think they've had 1 or 2 trophies over the last 5 or 6 seasons, but it's not enough. Nottingham and Sheffield are supposed to be the biggest teams in the league. Right now, there's a tiny team on a slightly different island that keeps winning everything. So, I mean, what do you do? The most interesting thing for Nottingham is their netminder signing, is the pulling over of Rok Stojanovic from Sheffield. Mm-hmm. That put the cat amongst the pigeons on social media when that was announced. Now, if he turns into an absolute stud for them, especially in games against Sheffield, just watch the Tangerine boys go mental, because they will eat their team alive for letting him go.
Massively. I would 100%. When as you mentioned, John, like whenever that was announced, I think it was one of those ones that caught the attention of everyone. It caught everyone's eye, and I definitely think that the Panthers did something quite smart there. Whenever that announcement was signed, and I think it was a smart move for them. But as you say, they kind of do need to kind of almost kind of get out of that mentality. I suppose they need to try and do something in order to try and break that idea that they are the Scottish team of the English teams. That makes sense. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say it that way, but you know, I mean, the lower end of the English teams. You know, I suppose they need
That's
to start
okay. My
fighting back.
national pride didn't feel anything when you said that at all.
The other one I want to talk about, obviously we're trying to cover most of the teams anyway before we move on, but Manchester Storm, they had a relatively okay season last year, proper mid-table, stuck in the middle, Hawaii kind of through. They usually always kind of have a good start to their season. They always kind of have maybe and then struggle a wee bit. So far, not a lot of massive changes there in Manchester. I think they've announced 2 players today or yesterday, anyway, this week, where they've announced a couple of 2-way deals with some young players, both on 2-way contracts with the Hull Seahawks. So they named 2 players that they brought in, so Bobby Chamberlain and Declan Balmer. And I think, I don't know, I think there's probably a few other teams, but I know they're the first 2 that jumped out at me to say that, you know, obviously they're building towards, you know, obviously. Well, let's not get into the conversation about the whole developmental stuff, because there's clear comments made by the heads of the Elite League following this fixtures release and the changes to the rosters of this year in terms of increase of
well, you say that, and then Sheffield make moves to buy their lower league team.
Well, that's an interesting one. So we will talk about that before we finish off.
Is the Elite League in the development game, or is it not?
Yeah. Well, we'll
Anthony,
see.
Anthony, I know you're out there. Come on, I know you've got a comment on that.
So I mean, Manchester, just, you know, it's hard to know. Again, Manchester, as I say, they've kind of stuck a bit with one goaltender instead, and they've replaced, and I've got a second new goaltender coming in there. Defense wise, it looks like a relatively new defensive line in terms of, or 2 defensive lines anyway. But forwards wise, they looks quite stable, and quite a few names from last year, joined by 1 or 2 more new names, I suppose, in there in Manchester. So again, unknown. But again, another unknown. It is all unknown until we see these teams on the ice. But another team that was competing right at the start of the season last year, which everyone was kind of taken aback by, was Coventry Blaze. Obviously, Coventry were dominating both in the Challenge Cup stage as well as the Elite League stages in the first 2 to 3 months of the season. Unfortunately, kind of got that Christmas period, which always happens for a lot of the teams. Mixture of maybe just fixture overload, just a lot of teams a lot of players coming together.
No team in the Elite League gets to talk about fixture overload. We all play the same number of games. The only time that you don't play as many games as the rest is when you get kicked out the Challenge Cup at different stages, or you don't make playoffs. So Crimea River, everyone plays the same number of games.
I mean, in terms of the middle pack, John, obviously, like, we'll look at Coventry, Manchester, and Nottingham. We'll call in the middle pack for now. I mean, do you think any of those particular teams have done anything particularly different that you feel will push them that wee bit higher, or do you think they're just destined to always kind of remain in that middle part?
Coventry, massively interesting. Ooh, camera nearly went there. Coventry, once again, it's net minding that's the most interesting thing there, and it's the signing of Taran Kozun across into that team. That's hugely interesting. Kozun previously of Cardiff, coming across to Coventry now. That's a big move by Coventry. That's a statement move, I think, to bring him in between the pipes. He wasn't getting the games. I think he didn't get the split that he was expecting to get with Bouncy. So the fact that he's come across here as part of what seems to be a 3-goalie system, with what I imagine is going to be a young Brit as well in there. So, look, Coventry are a team that you can't ever dismiss. You can absolutely never dismiss them. Danny Stewart is a proven coach. He's just come up against some hot opposition over the last few seasons in the likes of Sheffield, Cardiff, and Belfast. And let's be honest, it's the spending power as well. There's all this talk of caps and spending over the cap and all the rest of it. But like, spending power. And when you've got things like university deals, then they just add to the potential draw for the players that you can bring in. And when you say that, yeah, actually, we will go and play in Europe.
Very true. Very true. I suppose the other question to ask then, moving on to the next set of teams, let's look at Cardiff, because you mentioned they're Cardiff and Sheffield. Cardiff and Sheffield so far look to be the 2 teams who have done relatively very little in relation to changes to their teams. They have kind of stuck to well tried the tradition of well tested players that they kind of know, and I think both the teams have only so far signed 5 or 6 new players to the teams, which are relatively smaller numbers compared to the likes of you've got your Belfast, your Guildford, your Scottish teams all signing about maybe 10 new players, 11 new players. I mean, let's look at Sheffield first. Obviously, it was announced last week. Obviously, the return of Valorant, but also they announced the return of Petgrave, much to an interesting response from social media as well, where those 2 names were mentioned.
The Valorant one mostly because of the questionable video that was put out of it. The Sheffield PR machine continues to bemuse everyone around the league. They are what they are, and to be honest, I think at this point they're playing into it as well. People know to expect to be either weirded out, creeped out, or just plain offended by what comes out of that social team. So that's they do what they do because they know they do it, and they know they generate clicks, likes, and traffic to their lovely website. But remember to bring cash.
Yeah, it was pretty cringeworthy. You're right. I forgot about that Valorant one. Oh, yeah. But the Petgrave one announcement last week, I think, to everyone's enjoyment, I think there was a lot of traction in that. I think it created a lot of memes anyway, and a lot of jokes around the league from various different teams about the fact that a lot of time is spent in the penalty box. So we can expect a lot of.
My most interesting one there is I noticed that they've signed Mark Simpson. I wasn't aware that Mark Simpson, the very well known BBC Northern Ireland news correspondent, was a hockey player. So all power to him. Good luck.
That's very specific. Very specific. Let's before we finish off and move on to our next part, let's just have a quick look then at the remaining 3 teams, the ones who were basically in the contention last year. Obviously, we have one team who is the triple champions, which we'll talk about last. Obviously, let's look at Cardiff first. Cardiff, as I mentioned, or no, we already kind of briefly mentioned about Cardiff. Obviously, very little in terms of changes wise there. Again, 5 or 6 new players being mentioned and kind of brought in. Cardiff are heading off to Europe as well this year. Obviously, they got the 4th place part to go to Cardiff to Europe, which is an interesting place to end and still go to Europe. But they put together
sloppy seconds.
Exactly, yeah, quadruple sloppy seconds. So I mean, they're putting together a team which obviously they try to keep a bit of I suppose known entities there. Joey Martin returning again for another season in Cardiff. Ben Bynes returning again as well. Josh Batch returning. Mark Richardson returning. Riley Brandt returning. I mean, they quite a few names. Ben Davies as well, as you mentioned as well. I mean, is it just and I suppose this is maybe in kind of the opposite of what maybe a bit of what the Guildford has done. Cardiff have went for kind of like a stick to the players, and see where you go with that. Obviously, they're thinking that's working for them. But in terms of Guildford this year have come back. Obviously, they've kept their defensive parents kind of quite strong. Having 4 of them return, including Ben O'Connor, Mike Crocock. They've got names like that returning, but in terms of their forwards, they've got 2 or 3 returning players, but they've got another new names there on their forward lines. Guildford obviously were right in there. As we know, they were in first place right up to, I want to say, maybe January time. They were right there, January, February time anyway. They were fighting strong in that first place, holding it strong. Unfortunately, tipped by Belfast Giants. Well, thankfully for us, but unfortunately tipped by Belfast Giants at the end. I mean,
right at the end, final weekend.
Guildford
the maths is still there.
Guildford out of all of the teams. John, I mean, I'm right in saying probably have the toughest job this year in relation to, was it a 1 year fluke, or can they do a second year with another run of form?
Yeah, look, we've always said since they joined the league, they're a team on the up. When they came into the Elite League with Milton Keynes, it was very clear that Guildford were the quality that came in, and Milton Keynes made up the numbers. And things happened with Milton Keynes; they dropped away down again, and we hope to see them back. But Guildford, they have built year on year. They've made smart changes in personnel. They've learned and they've grown into the Elite League, probably better than any team since the league's inception, really. When you talk about new coming teams, I mean, yes, you're absolutely right. They not only have to prove that they can do it again, they also have a massive point to prove to their fans after rejecting the Continental Cup and using the excuse of too many games to concentrate on in the Elite League, the Challenge Cup, and that they want to be successful domestically. We talked about this in the podcast after playoffs when they made their announcement that they weren't going to take up the place. They are under the microscope as a team, as a franchise, because of that decision. Now, some will have forgotten over the summer. Some will just be craving any Guildford Flames hockey down there. But when the season starts and people start seeing Belfast going off to the Champions Hockey League and Cardiff heading off to the Conti Cup, the competition that Guildford should be in, then that's where fans will start to potentially ask questions if domestically the Guildford Flames don't make it work.
Yeah, correct. 100%. I think you've got that spot on. I think you're 100% right. I mean, you've got the issue of, you know, they have something to show because obviously they've made a statement and they've put a statement out there to say, you know, we chose to go one way with this year because we feel that that's something we need to focus on and we need to build up on that. And I think they've put themselves in a point where they kind of have something that they need to show that we said this and we're going to stand by that. And I think they now at the point where they kind of have to kind of almost like, yeah, really, I suppose, you know, put a stamp on that to say, yep, we said we were going to do this, and by the performance that we're doing this year, we've shown that we made the right choice, because we don't want to come to the end of the year and fans to go, well, we didn't really perform the way we wanted to, and we also missed out on that. So yeah, I would agree with you on that one. John, just quickly, not quickly, but obviously quickly, the last team to obviously look at is the reigning, defending, current triple winning champions, the Belfast Giants. The Giants this year will be the first team to play competitively in the 2023-2024 season when they take on the task of going to the CHL, and that'll be just at the start of September, he says confidently. Team so far, the roster for the Belfast Giants, goaltending has stayed the same. 3 familiar names have returned. In the form of Tyler Bascarani, Andrew Dixon, and Jackson Whistle. Defensive lines, only three familiar names returned to the defense lines. The rest are all brand new names. Well, one returning name, shall we say, which we talked about in our last podcast in the form of Davy Phillips. And then in terms of our forwards, a lot of our lines and a lot of the key players from Belfast, some players not surprisingly left. We kind of knew it was coming. But a lot of new players there in terms of our forwards. Some strong names coming in terms of our quality, in terms of what it looks like. We obviously have Giants continue the form with enjoying the name Cooper, having brought in a third Cooper, shall we say? So this is Oliver Cooper. They're definitely trying to find the Coopers out there. How do you feel Belfast is shaping up? I think potentially have one more signing, I think, they announced potentially.
Yeah, I think we're on the clock here to get finished by 9 o'clock to let the AVFTB guys take over here on the live. And I believe that they've got the final signing of the off season to announce. But Giants are shaping up incredibly well. If you're a Giants fan, they are terrifying. If you're one of the other 9 teams in the league, even looking at your own rosters, I don't care if you're looking at the fact that Belfast, after the season that they've had, have been able to keep hold of their goalie trio. Never, ever, ever discount the value that Andrew Dixon brings to that team. Yes, I know that he is our third string netminder, but the work that he does with the guys at training, the work that he puts in is just incredible, and he is every part of the success that this team has had over the last few seasons, going into his 13th season. Absolutely incredible. Retaining Jackson Whistle is enormous. That, I think, was, with the exception of someone who we signed on the D line, I think was one of the shocks of the summer so far. Jackson, everyone knows, Tyler came back partway through last season and became effectively the number 1 netminder in Belfast. everyone perhaps expected Jackson to maybe take a step to another team again, like he has done previously, and look for that number one spot. But having an interchangeable team of Tyler Beskorowany and Jackson Whistle, that puts us already leaps and bounds ahead, leaps and bounds ahead of many, many other teams. In fact, every other team, I'll say it, in the Elite League. Yes, we've lost some massive firepower in Scott Conway, but there are some signings coming up. Aaron Nazarian looks hot. He looks fantastic. Oliver Cooper looks brilliant. And I took some heat on Twitter for this, but Elijah Baraga coming in from Dundee, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I can't wait to see how he performs as we go in through the season. The big shock, and I think we talked about it last time, Davy Phillips was effectively the first signing announced by the Giants in the offseason. So to see him coming back to the Giants, I love it, actually, now that I've had time to think about it. Having veteran defensive experience in this team, considering what we are trying to do this season. What we achieved last season was one thing. Trying to do it again, you need that veteran leadership. And two names, when you talk about that veteran leadership, really jump out right now on that squad. And it's David Phillips and Mark Garside.
I would agree. First off, I'm gonna be the first one to put up my hand, and I would say, obviously, you just go back to what you were saying there about our goaltending trio, especially Jackson Whistle. I'll be the first one to say that I had my doubts, and actually, whenever Jackson announced that he was returning to the Belfast lineup, part of me, and I mean this in no disrespect, part of me was very disappointed in the fact that the Giants had re-signed Jackson Whistle, simply for the fact that I personally believe that Jackson had a standout, phenomenal season last year before Tyler Beskorowany came in and took that place. And I love Tyler Beskorowany. We know I love Tyler Beskorowany. Like, we all do. We're just big fans. We're big fanboys of Tyler Beskorowany. And when Tyler came in, I was a bit confused as to why the choices made to kind of maybe bench Whistle as much as they did, because Whist played such phenomenal hockey at one point last season. Yeah, there was a bit of a dip around November, but apart from that, he had a very strong season. And I kind of was a bit disappointed because when it was announced he was signed back, I just felt like, and maybe this year there'll be a bit more tandem, and maybe he'll play a bit more games, and it'll get a bit, it'll fall into place a bit more, and whatever it is. And I hope to see it. But I just felt like Jackson's now maybe a place where when he first went off and they kind of tried to start building a team around him in Sheffield, I think it was, if I remember correctly, and it didn't really work out too well from that first time around. But I feel that Jackson's definitely in a place now where he is on par, if not, stronger slightly than a certain other English goaltender in Cardiff. And I feel like it's Jackson's time to get more of a start and to be seen more. And I do genuinely think that. And so part of me was kind of disappointed to see him coming back as a 1-2 tandem type thing, because I just feel like he could probably get more ice time somewhere else. But he's made the right choice for him. Obviously, he's made that decision for himself, and he feels that that's the right choice for him. And I am only more than too happy to see both Tyler and also having the tandem of Jackson Whistle. I mean, you can't beat it. You can't beat it with a big stick. As you say, John, yeah, as you mentioned, it's got the big question mark, or the big thing that came whenever they announced, which was not a surprise announcement, whenever it was announced that Conway would not be returning to the Belfast Giants for the season. Now, there is some rumors out there to say that Conway has departed, obviously, for pastures new in Europe, and there is rumors out there that basically say that there is kind of, I don't know what truth there is in rumors. I'm sure someone can kind of confirm or not confirm, because they'll have to deny it or whatever, but I'm sure someone else can confirm it. But there is rumors, obviously, that have been circulating to say that if it doesn't quite work out for him in Austria, come mid-season, that there's a potential to kind of, he's tied back into the team in some way, or there's maybe some kind of agreement that's been made, like a gentleman's agreement maybe that's been made, that he could return to Belfast.
If that's true, be afraid, Elite League. Be very afraid.
We'll get a lot of fans from other teams who'll jump on and be like, Belfast Giants paying for the league again.
I don't care. See, the only thing I'm thinking about here, see if he does come back, I really hope his first game is in Scotland.
Yeah, that's true. I
expect him to spend at least 59 minutes in the penalty box.
We have a lot of obviously, you say you kind of summed up quite nicely there, John, in relation to that kind of veteran lineup, I suppose, the veteran experience that we have now on the ice. As you mentioned, you've got your Brit packs and stuff that we've got there in the form of Mark Garside and David Phillips, both on the D lines. Creating that veteran experience that we have, but also we have the likes of Mark Cooper coming back. We have Ben Lake, Kieran Long coming back as well, who all know this league really well in terms of been playing with the Belfast Giants for a long time. And I'd say a lot of those at least those 5 names, I would say, would be at least one of them will possibly be in contention for this year's captaincy, I would say, if not assistant captaincy as well. So it'll be interesting to see where that kind of goes. And we don't have too long to wait. As we mentioned already, the off season is quickly coming up. We have the first games against the Cardiff Devils in the preseason at the end of August. I think it's the 25th of August, I believe, somewhere around then. And I mean, we're less than a month away now to that first preseason game, and I'm sure we all can't wait for that.
That's not the most pressing matter right now that needs to be addressed. The one name that we haven't mentioned that's returning on the Belfast Giants roster is Sean Norris. Sean Norris is returning. Number 14 is returning. Let's be honest. The most pressing thing that has to happen right now is the Giants need to get their finger out and get the jersey released and get the pre-orders opened so that I can be ready for the season.
I'm sure that will be that. Apart from the most common question that I see on a certain social media channel, on a certain social media page, the most common question is, when is the shirt being released, or is the new shirt out yet? So we'll see when that comes out. I'm sure that will be coming in the matter of the next 2 weeks or so. I would say we'll see something about that. I would hazard a guess anyway. Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's at least 4 guys on this podcast who all know which number and name and jersey they're getting this year. Because I know I definitely be getting a Norris jersey. I wonder if there's some. I wonder we should price up to see how much it is to sponsor that thing. Because it's definitely something I would consider.
because then we all fight about who gets an arm, who gets that arm, who gets the front panel, and who gets the back panel.
No, we'll frame it and then we'll just stick it on our wall. And each person can have it for 3 months of the year. It'll be fine. It'll work out.
Okay.
3 months, 4. 3 months. Yeah, there's 4 of us. Yeah, we'll talk about that off air. Let's stick with obviously we were talking about the games coming up, but let's stick with the season to come. Let's talk first off about, John, your favorite cup, your favorite competition, which is the first games of the season will be in the form of this competition, in the form of the Challenge Cup. The Challenge Cup will return next year in the same format as we've previously seen it in the 2022-2023 season, with no changes. It will be still 2 group stages, group stages moving into semi-finals, moving into quarterfinals, semi-finals, and final, played some point probably at the tail end of the season, when it should really be played at the tail end of the season. 10 teams will be divided into 3 groups, and the groups will have stayed the same again this year. Cue the obvious responses of Belfast Giants winning the group again. Yeah, they're going to go through. Let's be honest. 8 teams will qualify for the quarterfinal.
If we don't, it's your fault.
I'm confident, John. 8 teams will qualify for the quarterfinals, both those, and then semifinals will be played at home and away, and aggregate scored in series like last year. And the final is scheduled for a one-off game in March 2024, with the highest seed team getting home ice advantage. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring this up, John, is because obviously we knew it was coming. We knew the Challenge Cup was going to be coming back as a thing. We kind of knew it was going to come back as the same thing as last year. But there was some interesting comments made in the release of that announcement this year, in the form of Mike Hicks, who is the current hockey operations for the Elite League. He had mentioned, it was if anybody remembers or anybody took part in the fan experience, or the fan survey that was put out just towards, I think it was maybe March time last year. They put out a mass survey to the fans to ask their opinions and thoughts on the Elite League, including do you have a pet, that sort of thing. It was really random, but they released obviously some of the kind of the earliest responses to that survey. Some of the survey responses were just what was the point in that? Why did they need that information there? What kind of, all I know is they expect for this coming season for nearly all of the teams across the league is a new range of pet products. Is my guess. Every single team is going to have brand new pet products coming out, including like replica jerseys. I'm going to guess, because one of the things they focused on was, surprisingly, a lot of the teams, like 90% of the people who follow the league have a pet. And I'm like, why is like what?
Which
right?
exactly
Okay.
mirrored the statistics on pet ownership across the entire country. It was useless data. Useless data.
So basically,
they're zeroed in on this, and yet the Challenge Cup hasn't changed.
Well, I mentioned that the one thing that it does mention in the press in the release that the Elite League did put out about the Elite League, the Challenge Cup this coming season, is they did put out a statement. It was said, we want to acknowledge that the format of the Challenge Cup was the highest item of negative feedback that we received in the fans survey, and continuing with the same format in 2023-2024 is not simply ignoring this feedback. Planning for 2023-2024 had already started before we launched the fans survey, and our season length and format had indeed already been agreed before the results of the survey had been presented to us. We are now having discussions looking at other formats in our league settings meetings since then, and we will continue to look at what we can do here to move forward to make these changes in a new format in the following season, something that will work for all 10 teams. It's positive in some ways, in that they're saying, look, we're acknowledging
a survey. They didn't need a survey to tell them that the Challenge Cup was going to be the most negative thing that was going to come back. They could have addressed this years ago.
I agree with you. They didn't need a survey to tell them it, because they just had to listen out and just look on social media and just have a look to see what the fans are saying around the leagues.
All that's happened here is the league has put something out and have been forced into making a statement, and now are being forced because they now have something in writing that says the fans hate this competition and hate the current format of it. You have to do something. Tell me I'm wrong.
Yes, but are you not going to give them at least a bit of like kudos for at least acknowledging the fact, like, right, we're going to do something? Is there not even a bit there? You're kind of like, okay, I'll let them have this season, because obviously they had started the planning for this season before they got the results, which they didn't need to wait for the results. But are you not giving them something? Are you not going to
listen? I get in trouble every time when I try to do laundry at home and I put whites in with the darks and they come out ruined. And I acknowledge every single time that I need to try harder. Do you know what? It still happens.
You separate whites? You separate whites and darks?
Absolutely. You don't?
I just bung everything in.
Wow, this has taken us down a different avenue. But anyway, the Elite League, by acknowledging it, are basically saying, yeah, okay, you got us. Oh, we didn't know the Challenge Cup was the thing that you all hated. Okay, we'll have a look at it, guys. Yeah, okay. Yeah. See you for 24-25, guys. Can't wait to see the new format with the final, I don't know, probably sometime in June.
We hate it, but we love to win it. That's
absolutely. Format's absolutely perfect. We keep winning it. Who cares?
Last, before we finish off, as I said, we're trying to keep it short and sweet and just kind of do a quick roundup. But the last thing I just wanted to kind of have a quick chat about, John, before we finished off the podcast for this week, or for this month, I should say, is just the one thing that has been interesting coming into this season is the Elite League also released a bit of information in relation to preseason season ticket sales, shall we say, and how the season ticket sales have done so far this season. Obviously, we talked at the end of last season about how it was one of the strongest seasons in the Elite Ice Hockey era in relation to attendances right across the league. We've seen some fantastic attendances, some amazing ticket sales right across the Elite League for all teams. Maybe not so much for Fife, but I mean, it's positive. Did you get a chance to have a look at this in terms of what they were saying about the ticket sales for season tickets this year?
Yeah. So basically, I think if I'm right, everything is on the up except for Fife, who've pretty much stayed the same. But this was released, I think, pre-Goin signing. And I know that there's been a big upswing, and actually season ticket early bird sales, I think, for Fife actually only closed tomorrow, because they've realized that fans were sitting waiting. I think sales were very, very poor up until Goin signing. But yes, I have read this. To go back to the original question, yes, I have read this. It is really, really good to see that you've got the big teams are upping their season tickets. So we are clearly becoming more mainstream as a sport. More people are choosing to go to these games on a regular basis. More bums in seats means more money for the league, which should mean a better product. It's interesting that this is happening, and this may not be where you thought the discussion was going, but I find it interesting that this is happening at a time where the league in itself is managing itself in a very interesting way, in that we now no longer have a league sponsor. We now no longer have a broadcasting deal. So things are getting a little bit more insular and a little bit more local again, because we don't have either of those. And look, I know that everyone out there is hoping that there's going to be some kind of announcement about some sort of streaming service that's going to be there. We've got, for the last couple of seasons, we finally had all 10 teams with webcasts. It's there to be done. And I've had a chat with a few people about how this gets done, and you region lock it the same way that the NHL does. That stops the argument from the likes of Sheffield and Nottingham about locals won't come to the game if they can watch it at home. Of course they will. People can live right next door to football stadiums and get it on their TV, but choose to go to the stadium for the atmosphere. So for some people, watching it on TV works better. It suits their personal circumstances better. Or for the likes of me, who can't go, and I know the Giants have answered this in a way. I can't go to as many Belfast Giants home games as I used to, but now I can get the streaming season ticket. Granted, I'm not really willing to pay the same as I would for a season ticket at the game as I do for streaming, so I don't do that. I'd be interested to see what the uptake and the numbers are on that and how big that's been. But the biggest thing for me is the game is on the increase, which is fantastic. You've got the likes of Cardiff, who've broken their franchise record for season tickets. You've got Glasgow, with all the news around their new ownership, their new coach, their big new signings. They've had a huge upswing in season ticket sales. That was a big season ticket core that they had anyway, and they've managed to increase that even off the back of a very, very controversial season, which is great news for them. Manchester, I believe, as well, I think reading through this, they've also seen an upswing. Across the board, we're seeing an upswing. Hockey is becoming more mainstream, and it's fantastic to see.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you've got some impressive stats and figures coming out there for right across the league. You know, we've got the likes of an increase of almost that Glasgow confirmed that almost 50% of their overall arena capacity was sold as season tickets, an increase of 25% of their season ticket holders increase from last year. You have the Manchester announcing that they have 30% more people have taken season tickets this year. Again, setting another record there. Nottingham, 250 additional new season tickets. Not really percentage given there. Belfast hasn't given percentage, but they have stated that it's the highest ever season ticket sales since the club's inception in 2000. I mean, fantastic numbers, and as you say, it's strong and it's a positive thing. Coming back to what you were mentioning there, John, just before we finish off, coming back to what you were mentioning in relation to, it was kind of a chat that we were having in the last podcast, but since our last podcast, it has been confirmed that that Viaplay in general have removed their broadcast or taken away broadcasting in general outside of
their whole market.
3 or 4. They've completely changed their market. They come out completely. So whenever we had surmised last year at the end of our last podcast, you know, what did this mean for the league? Obviously, they've lost their title sponsors. They've lost broadcasting. Where does broadcasting go? I know you mentioned there about the webcasts, and each team has their own webcasts. We're never going to see a webcast feature or a webcast system or service. Like people out there, and I don't mean to sound rude, but people out there who think that there's some solution to have some kind of like NHL quality streaming service for the Elite League. That's never going to happen. It's not a possibility. And the reason being is that each team would lose too much revenue by agreeing to some form of streaming service that is across the whole of the whole team. How do you set a pricing point that's fair for all of the teams, and how do the teams get enough money out of that price point? Because if you think about it, people are not willing to spend more than, say, $14.99 a month maybe on a streaming service, shall we say? And
I think the difference in what I would expect the difference between an NHL Game Center situation and an EIHL Game Center situation is that you wouldn't be buying a subscription that grants you access to all 10 teams. I think you would be purchasing your streaming ticket, your streaming season ticket for your team. The one thing I think that would do is it would make the price more competitive for other teams. What I think it would do is it would aid the away fans more. So if you've got Dundee fans who can't make it down to Guildford, if you've got Belfast fans who basically can't make it to any of the 9 other arenas, that is who that helps. That it solves that away deal problem, and then that becomes a revenue. But then that becomes a revenue split with the away teams. It becomes an away issue, if you like. And I think there's a way that balances, and I think there's a way with sponsorship where that makes economic sense for the league. And this is the key thing. I'm not expecting the league to do this on its own. It has to come with sponsorship, it has to come with infrastructure, and it has to come with experience. So someone has to come in and do this. I don't expect the Elite League to suddenly employ one of the streaming services who provide a service for one of the 10 teams right now, because I don't think any of them are set up in a way that they can offer that, with the exception of maybe one or two, especially one who currently blocks me on Twitter because I was critical of the product that they were providing at the time. They do a lot of other sports. They provide outside broadcasting for things like Premiership Rugby and a few other things. They're one of the few that I think that could be set up in a way to do this. But they're already involved with the league. If they thought that was something that they could do, if they thought that they could provide a broadcast scheme or system, I expect that they would have brought that forward by now. I think there's a model where it works. I don't work in media. I don't work in corporate anything. I don't know what the solution is. But to me, as a layperson looking from the outside in, if it works elsewhere, why can't it work here?
Yeah,
we're a smaller league, and I feel like it can work.
Just looking at some of the comments there, I just seen that Anthony Russell from Banner to the Wall made a good point. He was saying that if Australia can do a single platform for all their streams, there is zero reason it can't happen here. The reason why it won't work is cardness and short-sightedness. That's a fair enough comment. I think this is definitely a conversation that we'll probably keep hearing throughout this season. I think it's definitely something, now that we know that there's no specific broadcasting this year coming for the Elite League. Obviously, the attention is going to turn to next year in terms of the 2024-2025 season, in terms of like, how do we secure something for that point, because we're too close to the season now for something for them to announce something for this season. So obviously they're going to look towards, well, what do we do for moving forward for next year? Do we get another broadcast right coming in from someone? Do we go to the likes of like BT Sport? Do we go to someone to kind of do something as a weekly product? And I think that is definitely something we're going to keep talking about throughout the season. So unfortunately for anybody who listens into our podcast, I'm sure this is definitely going to be a point that's going to come back several times this season. A bit like our when we normally do our normal podcast and we talk about the NHL and we talk about our favorite player in the NHL, it's going to kind of come up like that, where we're going to kind of talk about this maybe some more throughout the season as it kind of goes along. John, I'm mindful that we said we'll keep it short. I think we've covered everything so far that we wanted to cover. Did I miss anything? Is there anything else that you feel that we haven't talked about that we wanted to mention?
Nothing that's sticking out to me. I just want to shout out a new find rightly. I dangled that worm and he came straight on there. Anthony, yes, your point is absolutely correct about Tony Smith's answer on proposals for increasing imports and everything else. And we will go in further. We haven't talked much about it. This one we just mentioned the Steelers Steel Dogs situation. Let's leave that for when we've got a little bit more time to talk about it, because that is a bigger animal in itself. I think that creates a larger conversation, and I think potentially we've said it multiple times. I think having someone like yourself on to talk about that would be fantastic as well, given your experience with that league.
With that, I think then that's everything round up for so far from June until now. We will be back pretty early on, I'd say, in August, probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks anyway, to trying to get back into our regular schedule of every fortnight from moving forward in the regular season. So we will come back before the preseason games start, and before the CHL starts to take off. So we will come back to it. I have officially booked my tickets to Austria last night. So I'm off to Austria. Sorry, guys. Sorry, John. Sorry, Dave and Aaron. I'm off to Austria.
It's fine. It's fine. I'll just go to Dundee, shall I?
You go to Dundee. I know Dave's actually off to, I think, somewhere for work actually that during the Austria game. But anybody who is going to Austria, I will see you there. I'm looking forward to it. It's part of my birthday present. I won't tell you what else I'm going to do. It's going to be so much fun. I'm going to the Red Bull Ring as well while I'm there. Which is obviously a nice Formula One track in Austria. So we're going there as well for one of the days, and a potential track experience, which is an interesting one. So we'll see. But with that, we will just sign off for this week. I'm Marty.
I'm John.
Have a great week.